The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has released the results of a NANOS poll the organization commissioned concerning Canadians' views on government restrictions on the kinds of counseling Canadians can choose to address issues of sexuality and gender. The poll from NANOS gauged the Canadian public's understanding and opinion on the legality of counseling options. The survey was a phone poll conducted from February 28th to March 4th of over 1,000 Canadians. 9 in 10 Canadians agree, or some would agree, that consenting adults should be free to get the sexuality counseling of their choice, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, and this was consistent across regions, age, and gender. Canadians are more likely to say they are uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable with the government making it illegal to provide counseling for gay individuals to reduce unwanted sexual behavior, while at the same time allowing straight individuals to access the same services. Canadians are divided overall on whether counseling in various scenarios related to gender identity, sexuality, and sexual behavior for minors should be legal or illegal, with about 1/3 of Canadians consistently saying they are unsure. About 7 in 10 Canadians agree, or some would agree, there should be strict requirements for healthcare professionals to assess whether it's in a young person's best interests to irreversibly alter their body if it doesn't match their gender identity, and that counseling services with a wait-and-see approach should be available to minors who are thinking about changing their bodies through drug treatments.
I'm a lawyer with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Objectively harmful, coercive practices that are designed to change a person's sexual orientation, as we've just heard about, should be banned. That is what Canadians think of when they hear the phrase conversion therapy. But when it comes to gender identity, improperly conflated with sexual orientation in this bill, what we think we are talking about and what activists mean and are pushing for are not the same. By conversion, they mean talk therapy or watchful waiting to help a child or adolescent become comfortable in their own body, or that addresses other mental health concerns or past traumas, something that about 85% of them will do if given that space. That is what they want banned on pain of criminal sanction. When they say affirmation, they mean rejecting the body a child was born in and embarking on a path of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, multiple surgeries, and a lifetime of medication and dire consequences such as sterility and loss of sexual function. There's a whole industry developing around this conversion of kids, and it is being encouraged through the influence of gender activists on social media and even in our schools. Yes, that is the real conversion here, that is endorsed and supported by this bill.
I'm here today to represent Canadians who freely chose to receive counseling support for their unwanted sexual attractions and behavior, and who greatly benefited from them. When I was a university student, I began to experience unwanted sexual attractions. I also discovered online pornography and was getting addicted. I went to a spiritual leader I trusted, and she recommended a counselor for me that shared my spiritual values. I began to see this counselor. Some of what he said was not so helpful. Some of it was very life-giving. And as I moved across Canada, I've seen different counselors and had many different conversations on this. I'm grateful that everywhere I moved, this service was available to me. But now this service will be denied to me and people like me because the kind of sexual behavior I want to reduce is same-sex behavior. No one wants anyone to be coerced into counseling. I would be the last person to advocate for this because I know if I was forced into counseling, it would not have benefited me. But what most Canadians don't understand is that the recent conversion therapy bans being proposed and debated will also ban the counseling I freely chose as a consenting adult. It would even criminalize the conversation I had with my spiritual mentor because she gave me the name of a paid counselor.
I was 16 years old when I came out and identified as gay, and I explored the area of gay culture on the internet in a desire to understand my sexuality, who I was, and where I belonged. I also began to engage around that time in same-sex relationships, visit gay bars, and do various other things in order to fully accept myself and embrace this new identity. As a 16-year-old, I realized that even though I was doing everything that society said would make me happy, I was still very unsettled. On my own initiative, I chose to regularly receive counseling. This counselor was incredibly compassionate and caring, and neither affirmed nor condemned the decisions that I was making or my sexual identity. Depression, anxiety, and fear, suicidal thoughts began to lift off of me. As a result, I decided I no longer wanted to continue the course my life was on. I ceased to engage in same-sex relationships and instead sought to live my life in a way that was consistent with my faith and convictions. The counseling I received did not remove all my same-sex attractions. However, I have found a deep joy and fulfillment in not engaging in my same-sex behaviors in order to live in accordance with my beliefs and convictions. Since I've been a teenager, I have regularly sought out support and counseling in order to reduce my non-heterosexual attraction and sexual behaviors. Since moving to Calgary last year, I have called numerous counseling agencies and requested a service to support me in the goals that I have chosen for myself. These organizations have denied me service due to Calgary's conversion therapy bylaw. In my opinion, this is a direct violation of my protected rights and freedoms as a Canadian.
I got into this, well, I started feeling this way when I was 12 and it ended at 14. I was transgender for a variety of reasons, including a lack of a strong athletic female role model in my life and female friends. As an autistic girl, I was more accepted by boys. I didn't fit in with the girls because all they wanted to talk about was boys they thought were cute, what to wear. Being with boys gave me a feeling of belonging. Working out was the best way for me to handle my gender dysphoria. With weight training, I sculpted my body into a lean and muscular physique the way I wanted it without having to take testosterone and puberty-blocking drugs. And then one day, I met a young woman at dance practice who I'll call Allison. She set an example for me because she was flexible. So when I came out as a girl at school after I was known as trans for 2 years, I was bullied by many students and even some certain teachers. I was treated like a social outcast. It is important to have a variety of different resources because there's no one-size-fits-all solution. We are all different and we all have different backstories and different influences that shape who we are as individuals and the decisions we make. All stories vary, and what works for me may not work for someone else. I believe in freedom of choice, and there's no freedom when there's a law put in place that bans a resource that could potentially help someone make a massive breakthrough and save a life that could have been lost by suicide because they were lost and they couldn't find their place.
Vulnerable youth do not understand the immediate consequences of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones on fertility and irreversible physiological impacts. Medical research suggests that at age 25, the brain becomes fully developed. The law in Canada provides no protection for vulnerable children, such as my daughter, if Bill C-6 becomes enacted. Politicians legislate counseling that rushes to transition the individual and does not investigate adequately the root causes of gender dysphoria.
Municipal governments and now, of course, the federal government are implementing so-called conversion therapy bans. Now, the concept of conversion therapy often brings to mind appalling and abusive practices implemented against people to change their sexual orientation. And these included things like electric shock therapy and chemical castration, abuse, coercion, and even torture. The prohibition of such abusive and coercive practices is, of course, justified. But however, recent conversion therapy bans make no reference to harm or abuse or coercion. And rather, these bans would prohibit even the voluntary supports that individuals choose and find beneficial concerning their sexuality and gender identity. And this banning of voluntary choices of Canadians is, of course, contrary to Canadians' fundamental charter rights and freedoms and their liberty. The definition of conversion therapy that's being utilized in these bans is where the problem arises. In Saskatoon, it's illegal for a gay person to get counseling to reduce a sexual addiction. The city councillors actually expressly voted to remove a provision that would have allowed LGBTQ adults to receive counseling for, quote, the purpose of managing sexual addiction or maintaining celibacy. while it is legal for a straight person to get that counseling to reduce a sexual addiction. And the federal bill primarily targets services offered for those under 18, but it will also massively restrict the ability of adult LGBTQ Canadians to access the counseling and support of their choice. There's an increasing number of children who are experiencing gender distress and gender dysphoria, and scientific research has shown that when provided with a watchful waiting approach, the vast majority of these young people will regain comfort in their natal gender, their biological sex. Bill C-6 is threatening to criminalize and punish with up to 5 years in prison anyone who is offering a service to change one's gender identity to, quote, cisgender as opposed to transgender. And so in so doing, Bill C-6 is actually imposing this one-way street, a one-size-fits-all solution, regardless of the best interests of a particular child. Now, the government essentially dictating a one-size-fits-all solution to issues of gender distress or gender dysphoria, that violates the charter rights of children, including their right to liberty and the security of the person. Children do have the charter right to the care and protection of their parents. But these conversion therapy bans would drastically interfere with the ability of parents and medical practitioners to make decisions in the best interests of their children. And even those who do not provide counseling or therapy could be convicted of a crime under Bill C-6 for promoting counseling or therapy that is caught in the expansive definition of conversion therapy that the Bill C-6 uses.